Welcome to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. I'm Michael Grosvenor.
And I'm Jack Fernino. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's songs and history and what his music has meant to us.
Baby, all the lights are turned on you. Now you're in the center of the stage. Everything revolves on what you do. You were in your prime, you've come of age. And you can always have your way somehow. 'Cause everybody loves you now.
Apart from the botched release of Cold Spring Harbor, 1971 was surprisingly a low-key year for Billy Joel. His teenage band collapsed a few years prior, and the proto-metal power duo that rose from its ashes failed to gain any traction.
Broke, depressed, and aimless, Billy was ready to leave the music industry for good. And he may have done just that if his manager at the time didn't come through with a last-minute deal.
Of course, that deal would haunt Billy for years to come. After the album was released in November, he played a sparse handful of dates in New York at the end of the year. Meanwhile, there are no reviews, interviews, or press clippings to speak of.
But look closely and you'll see a lot of small things develop, arrive, or otherwise get set in motion and affect his trajectory for decades to come. Join us as we dive deep into 1971.
Would you have me make a choice? Do I join the revolution? Will I be just another voice in the chorus of confusion? Well, I don't know anymore.
You know, this is a challenging one to do because it's sort of a dark year, and we'll get into that one soon. But it's also a fun one to do right now because it was almost a year ago that we did our episode on Cold Spring Harbor, which of course came out this year. You know, as we take another trip around the sun here, it's nice to sort of revisit the same time period, but from maybe a wider perspective.
In that episode, we talked about the album specifically, and I remember both of us commenting on how we were revisiting it for the first time and kind of hearing it with some new ears. It's going to be fun to cast a wider net here and talk about some of the things that surrounded it.
And I should follow up and say by dark, I did mean it was sort of a dark year for Billy, but also that it's just a dark year in terms of trying to find information. It's between his bands and, you know, he wasn't getting written up by the press. He wasn't on the radio or anything like that. Well, for the most part anyway. It was an interesting one to piece together, certainly. So before we get into the deep dark past of Billy Joel, we do have some new Billy Joel news, which is a little unusual in these uncertain times. As with everyone else, you know, Billy Joel hasn't been playing. Certainly the Madison Square Garden residencies are dark right now. But he's come back in the news in the oddest sort of way.
Every now and again, you'll see Billy's music resurface, especially with the younger generation, and you'll see a whole new crop of people get turned on to his music. And this is happening again as we speak in a way that I don't think anyone saw coming.
And in a way that most of us don't understand. Which brings us to our new segment. And you got to put some echo on my voice when we say this. Our new segment, Ask a Young Person. Here's the deal. This will come out a few weeks afterwards, but as of right now, Billy Joel is trending on TikTok. There's a short clip from Zanzibar, and it's doing whatever it does on TikTok. And I'm not sure what it does. I'm not sure Michael knows what it does. And based on some of the comments we've seen on Facebook and online, I think most Billy Joel fans are in the same camp as us. We don't know what the hell is going on.
So we decided to bring in Jack's daughter to shed a little light on what's been happening on TikTok lately.
So 18-year-old Olivia Fernino will explain to us what's going on. Olivia, come say hello to everyone.
Hello.
Let's start off with an easy question. Easy for you anyway. What is TikTok?
TikTok's a video sharing platform that came out in like 2018-ish. Basically, people record these short videos to audio bits. They could dance, they make art, it's whatever you can do. If you're familiar with the concept of Vine, it's like that, but reborn. Like, people use it for comedy, for art, for whatever they want, and they're like 15 seconds to a minute, so they're really short.
So from what I understand, what keeps happening is somebody just comes up with like a 15 or 20 second bit with music, and then what seems to happen is people then take the music and then they put their own video over it. Am I getting this right?
And that's kind of exactly what happens.
Okay. So explain to us what's going on with this Zanzibar clip.
I tried going through TikTok to figure it out because I just found out about it. It started with people doing a dance to it, to the part where, like, I got the old man's car. And we'll dance to it, and that's how it started. And then it spread all over the platform with people who are generally fans of Billy Joel finding it, and then people making jokes of the song. Like, one common thing I've seen in these TikToks is someone talking about how someone died, but they got their car, so they don't really care. So they're like, I got the old man's car.
It's still kind of odd. Is this clearing it up for you, Michael?
Do you have an account that you can share somebody else's video to your account? Is that how it works?
No, it's not like Twitter or Facebook where you share it, you like it, and there's this area called the For You page where anyone can show up. It's not like people who you follow. I mean, you can follow people on the platform, but that's in a separate page. But if something gets on the For You page, that generally means it's getting popular. So I think a couple of these dances got really popular and it just spread like wildfire.
And was the dance original as far as you know, or was that like a dance from something else, or somebody made up that little two-step thing just for that song clip?
I think someone made it up.
Is it unusual for an obscure song like this to gain traction, or is this the sort of thing that happens kind of often on TikTok?
Yeah, it happens often. A lot of obscure songs come out back into resurgence. Like, I know the one song where there's like, How Bizarre came back recently with people like making jokes about like, oh, that's so bizarre that this thing that I did happened. It's not unusual. Interesting.
And have you seen like when an obscure song like that rises up in TikTok, does that sort of spill over into the real world? Like how like the Never Gonna Give You Up became like its own new thing?
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of songs that are getting popular nowadays are actually getting popular through TikTok. So a lot of music artists nowadays are, how should I say this? They're marketing their music through TikTok. They're getting these people involved in their music through TikTok because they know if they have a song go viral on that app, people are going to listen to it.
So it was like, wasn't that the band Avenue Beat? Weren't they an example of that, if you know them?
Can you give an example of the song?
It was the Fuck 2020 song.
Oh, yeah, that blew up on TikTok. The Driver's License song that recently came out by Olivia Rodrigo got big on TikTok.
Well, I remember, Jack, even seeing more our generation, Fleetwood Mac. I think it was Dreams. There was the guy just like skateboarding, drinking cranberry juice or something.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And I believe
right.
The Fleetwood Mac song charted again as a result.
I think the first time we really saw that happen might have been Bohemian Rhapsody with Wayne's World. Remember that? Because it was in the commercial and it was that big set piece.
Bohemian Rhapsody became a hit in 3 different decades.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because then it just did it again, didn't it? Did you ever see Wayne's World, Olivia?
No, I don't think so.
Ooh, that's on me. I'm sorry.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Any other questions for our resident young person?
So as far as music goes, now have you find that there's been any music that you've discovered or become a fan of due to the platform?
Oh, definitely. There's been a lot of songs that I've discovered through the platform. Cosmo Sheldrake is one. He's like a folksy artist. Sir Chloe is another artist, like more alternative music. Yeah, it's definitely a good way to get music discovered.
How long do these things usually stay viral for? Like, so is there a way to predict how long like Zanzibar will stay on TikTok?
It depends how many memes people can get out of it.
What do you think the record is? Like, what's the longest one? Ballpark.
I think the longest one has been since quarantine last year with the Carol Baskin killed her husband. Because every now and then people still bring it up. They're like, oh yeah, remember when everyone was obsessed with Carol Baskin?
Yeah, that was a great 3 weeks, but feels like 20 years ago. Yeah, that was...
when that was the weirdest thing going on in the world.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, resident young person.
No problem. If you ever need a TikTok trying to explain again, you can always come to me.
You're welcome on the show anytime.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, with both our opening acts out of the way, let's get to the main attraction for the night.
If I need a cause for celebration, or a comfort I can use to ease my mind, I rely on my imagination, and I dream of an imaginary time. Oh, I know that
If it seems like we put a lot in the beginning of this episode, That's probably true because, as we said before, this was a really tough one to research and pull a full episode's worth of stuff. Even with Billy's debut album coming out, there really wasn't that much more to talk about. But there were a couple chestnuts that pop up along this year that I really think informed what would happen over at least the next 5 or 6 years, if not longer.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are a few pivotal things that did happen in 71. You got to understand these early years, it's tricky. Up until The Stranger, Billy wasn't really a household name, so he wasn't very well documented. So all these years leading up to The Stranger, you really have to do some digging to find out the information. So that's why some of these early years are a little trickier than others.
Even the late 60s, 68 through 70 is even easier than this because he was playing with the Hassles, he was playing with Attila. The Hassles put out 2 albums, Attila put out an album, so there's at least a couple album reviews, some liner notes, some recollections of shows, things like that. But 1971 comes on the heels of all that, after Attila flops, and before he has a solo career, and even before he thinks he wants a solo career.
All of this also seemed to happen in very quick succession, going from the Hassles to Attila, which were drastically different, and then within a year's time became the early stages of the Billy Joel we know today. It all happened very fast, and relatively speaking. He really didn't want to be out front. He wanted to be writing songs for other people. But he got some advice early on that the way to do it, if you wanted to be a songwriter, was to do your own record. And then once you have a record, to go out and tour it and promote it. So whether that's great advice or not, I thank whoever it was who gave him that advice, because otherwise we probably wouldn't have gotten the career we got out of Billy Joel.
Yeah, I believe it was Aaron Mazur that said that. He plays a pivotal role in this year. Before we get to that, I do want to mention there's an interview with Billy from, I guess, the early 2000s, and he's actually getting interviewed by Phil Ramone, of all people. And what he points to is 1970 or so being the year that the singer-songwriter really explodes. His quote about it was that James Taylor, quote, blew the door down. Like, to him, it was James Taylor, it was Joni Mitchell, it was Neil Young, it was some others too. This was really when this idea of, I'm the singer that also writes my songs, I guess Bob Dylan notwithstanding, that's when this really came up. That's really what he took advantage of. To that point, I'll say to this day, I still think with zero evidence, I think there's a little bit of retconning going on there. We talked about this the first time we talked about Cold Spring Harbor, and listening to those demos, I'll say it again, I really feel like he had it in the back of his mind that he was going to have a solo career, because when we listen to those demos, and we listened to the songs that made the album, there were more idiosyncratic songs on the album than there were demos. A lot of those demos you could see being in the Carole King sort of mold where those could have been sold off. But you couldn't see anybody else doing Everybody Loves You Now, I think, was a little idiosyncratic. It was a little different. Certainly no one else was going to do Nocturne, and he had all those demos, so why did he burn one off with an instrumental when he's trying to make an album that's going to get people to record his songs?
I really do agree that the album was crafted to be an album as opposed to shopping your songs to other musicians. It really was positioned as a proper record out of the gate, I think.
But it does call back to how, I think Liberty said it. We've gone through this a few times too over the last year. Liberty said how every album begins with Billy wishing he was playing Hammond organ in the back of a bar in someone else's band. Obviously, by the time the album comes out, he's comfortable being front and center again. And so you wonder if that album process didn't start here, or if that's a perfect microcosm of his sort of trajectory.
He started with the Hassles as the Hammond organ player in the back of the stage in this big band, and he slowly emerged as the standout of the Hassles. And then when he and John Small defected and formed Attila, Billy was the front man. I mean, there's only 2 guys, so it's not like you're fronting, a 6-piece.
And the other one's a drummer.
Right, exactly. But he was the singer. He was the front man. He always seemed to love playing in bands from that early age. Unless the experience of doing those 2 was so bad on him, I can't see him wanting to give that up and just be a songwriter. I think he loved performing with others too much.
I think he was embarrassed after Attila, to be honest with you. Probably when the maelstrom subsided over what must have been a rush of a few years. A few years when you're 20, 21 years old too, like holy hell, man, you know. The next thing you know, you got albums coming out, you know, you got big shows and stuff, and then it all comes crashing down. And maybe one day you pick up the album cover with you just like Attila the Hun with your buddy in a meat locker, and you were like, I think maybe I have to rethink my life choices.
And I tell you, if you read the back of the liner notes for it, we'll talk about the record on its own episode, but it's pretty comical how it's like trying to write this prose like we're going to destroy the world with these loud amps and just marching through cities. And it was just so ridiculous the way they even tried to position Attila, that no matter how the songs were, it was kind of hard to take seriously.
It's certainly not as bad as everyone says, but we'll get to that later for sure. So post Attila, post Hun gear, we find Billy definitely in a nadir. Now this is 1971 finds him just on the other side of 2 suicide attempts and also some time in, what was it, Bellevue that he was in?
I believe so. That's what I thought I remembered.
Yeah, a little time in a mental institute getting checked out. By Billy's own account, he says he kind of saw people that really had some major mental issues that they were working through or unable to work through. And for him, that sort of righted the ship. That's the moment when he was like, okay, I'm just 20 years old and
my problems are trivial compared to this, and I'm okay. That's an impressive realization at that age.
It is. It really is.
When you're 20, every little event and every little detail in your life feels magnified. Your emotions are to the extreme. So the highs feel super high, the lows feel super low when you're at that age.
Michael found this great New York Post article. It's called How Billy Joel Became the Piano Man. It was from January 26, 2014. If nothing else, what I like about this is that it seems like every time you try to read one of the Billy Joel biographies and they get to this time, you never get a clear sense of the timeline and who everybody was. And this article just streamlines the hell out of it and helps you out.
We were struggling to piece it all together, and this was one of those last-minute finds that really clarified quite a bit.
Yeah, because, half the problem wasn't that the information wasn't out there, but it's when you're trying to do a show specifically on 1971, and you're like, wait a minute, was this 70 or 71? Did this happen in early 72? It's, the lines really blur on this one. But this guy, Erwin Mazur, we were talking about, was Billy's first manager. And then now he's talking about Billy being 16 or 17, playing at the Long Island rock club My House. So this is the late 60s. Mazur says, there was always a darkness about Billy. You ever know people who, even when they're having a good time, they're not really having a good time? I always thought it stemmed from his dad abandoning his family. That sort of sets the stage for when the bubble bursts towards the end of 1970 on Billy's sort of phase 1 of his career.
I never really tied his childhood into his adult development, but it's clear that your childhood does play a large role into how you develop as an adult. I think he felt at such a young age that he had to take care of the family and take care of business. And I could imagine that you think you're going to get your big break with the Hassles signing to United Artists, doing 2 records. That doesn't pan out. So you go give it another go. You get with Attila. You signed to Epic Records. Here's another major record deal. That falls flat. To have these failures back to back, that's got to be a big shock to the system.
I want to say this. To understand what was really going on at this point, you have to forget everything you know about 1972, 1974, certainly 1977 on. I want you to think back to that weird kid in high school. You didn't talk to anybody. He didn't seem to be having much going on. Maybe you happened to catch him always listening to music, or maybe kind of plunked around in the band room or something. You found out he was in bands or something. And, you're getting on with your life and you just see this guy playing like little clubs or something, right? A person like that could be really taking a huge risk. And you have to think of yourself maybe when you're coming out of college, right? And you're ready to settle down and start working. Sure, you're probably still partying a bit, but, for all intents and purposes, you're on the track. And maybe you keep running into that guy or somebody else like him. You always see that guy, just clothes are probably old, a little faded all the time, never has that much money. When I think of Billy Joel in 1970, I think of that guy. I think of the guy that, how many people do you think passed him by going, man, it's a shame, that kid's just going nowhere. What a risk it is for Billy or anyone else to take at that age. To believe in themselves so much that after 2 busts, and 2 busts of what's really a high school band and your real shot at it, which would probably tell most people, well, it's time to hang it up. I tried the Hun costume. It didn't work out. Clearly, it's time to become an accountant.
How many of those guys in the Hassles stayed as professional musicians after that band broke up? The rest of the guys in the band had probably what's the most common trajectory after having a semi-successful regional band. You know, you tour for a couple of years, you do pretty well. The band ultimately breaks up as they do, and they go into corporate America, into the working force, and that's that. Billy did not go that path.
And now we're in sort of the real nadir of it all, right? So Billy's quasi-homeless, sort of infamously spending a lot of nights sleeping in a 24-hour laundromat. The other times he's living with his ex-bandmate John Small and his wife Elizabeth and their son Sean.
So even after those bands split, he and John remained friends. You know, I think it was just a matter of we still like each other, but this clearly isn't happening. So let's stop before we hate each other. And they remained close. And Billy got close to Elizabeth. And it was clear that they had a rapport early on. And I think Billy was drawn into her largely due to the time that he spent living with them all.
And so they begin having an affair. And so the story goes, every day John would go to work, there was an adjoining closet between that room and Billy's room, and Billy would go through the closet and slide up next to Elizabeth, and they'd kind of spend some time together there. I think nobody really gets skeeved out by this story because they ended up getting married, and he and John stayed friends, so it was like, hey man, we were 21-year-old hippies or whatever else. But this New York Post article was the first one I've ever seen to throw any shade John's way, with a throwaway line that just said, well, John was a womanizer anyway.
To somehow justify it.
Yeah. The New York Post was the only one that sort of like gave Billy a little bit of back on that one.
And yeah, that's the only place I've seen that at all.
So in between that, he's trying to make a few bucks on the side.
Yeah.
This reads like just a litany of what you would see in a movie about a guy trying to make it in the rock and roll world in the early 70s. He does some landscaping, which he says it wasn't landscaping, it was just lawn mowing. He starts dredging oysters, where he's told he'll get a raise when he's 40. Then I always thought this was funny because of how much he hated critics later on. He had a short stint reviewing albums for a music magazine. He hated it. He said he didn't have the stomach. He gave an album a bad review and he felt really bad about it. And it would have been easy money for him, but it wasn't his thing. He couldn't bear to do it.
Yeah, that's really wild considering his relationship with the critics over the years. I mean, you know, even Rolling Stone, who went on to praise him in the later years, you know, those early reviews were rough. And he always had that chip on his shoulder about the critics where he'd like tear up bad reviews on stage and go into the whole thing. He kind of made it a part of his shtick, so to speak. And it's hard to picture him being a critic considering how uncomfortable with it he is.
And it's funny because, you know, there's the old line about music journalists are just failed musicians. So they tried to be rock stars and they couldn't, so they became music journalists. Billy goes the other way. Billy couldn't be a music journalist, so became a rock star.
I was listening to a podcast today. There's a great one. I'll give him a little shout out. It's I'm okay, you're okay. I'm not okay, you're not okay is the podcast. It's my buddy Clint Wells, who hosts Metal Up Your Podcast. And then his co-host is this guy, Bob Schneider, who's an incredible singer-songwriter from Austin. Hilarious podcast. But they were actually talking about this a little bit in the episode I just listened to. There was a journalist, a critic, who worked for one of the major Northeast publications, I forget which, but he made some off-the-cuff comment on Twitter how basically it takes more talent to be a critic than the artist itself. And boy, that did not go over well.
Yeah, man.
And so they had a bit of fun with it. But what was actually kind of cool at the end of the day, which is not common this day and age, he was like, you know what? Yeah, I said that off the cuff. That's not right. My bad. And everyone moved on, which never happens anymore.
Yeah, apparently, if you just own up, Twitter leaves you the hell alone.
Yeah.
You know?
Sounds like the 90s.
I didn't write too many music reviews, but I did some journalism and some music journalism. And I've also written and recorded some songs. And no, that's not true at all.
When you talk about being a critic, that's not the important skill set here. It's the writing. Yeah. At the end of the day, your opinion isn't as important as how well you can write.
I wonder if that was more true back in this era. And I'll say this for better or worse. And I'll say this because that's when you had the guy's name I can never pronounce, Robert Christall, and you had Lester Bangs, and you had these guys who were their own personalities off the page. Gonzo personalities made it on the page. You know, I think now when you read a Pitchfork review, they're very much more encyclopedic. And I think back then, the emphasis was definitely on the writing because they only really compared things to contemporaneous artists. And it was just more about whatever experience these guys were feeling when they listened to the record. Whereas your Pitchfork reviewer now will go much further back, will go much more obscure, as everyone loves to make fun of Pitchfork for. The more obscure, the better. They probably do it on purpose half the time, you know?
It almost feels like some reviews now are more, like you said, they're more encyclopedic, they're more clinical than they were back then. I think part of that is Cream Magazine, Rolling Stone, all these different magazines where you had these critics and journalists. They were really the spot to see your band, hear about your band, learn about your favorite band. Nowadays, Google it, you'll find 2 million results on most of these artists. You know, you can find every photo that ever existed. You can go to YouTube, find 1 million recordings. It's so easy to find all this information. But back then, it was more about a well-crafted story. That's how you learn about your new favorite artists.
Dude, these guys were lunatics. You know, the bands were half outlaws. The guys following were drinking cough syrup and trying to write about what they thought of it. You know, this was a symbiotic. Oh, yeah. These guys were in the trenches, man, you know?
There's a new documentary about Cream Magazine, which was founded in Detroit. And, oh yeah, it was like a commune of like these outcasts living together, somehow pulling together this magazine. And really, if you replace magazine with a record, it's not too dissimilar than a band.
Yeah, it sounds like what the Dead did.
Exactly.
You know? And so here we have, Billy living with John Small, doing sort of the same thing.
Right.
Not making it in any sort of working way. So in the middle of this, there's Irvin Mazur.
Yeah, so Irwin, being one of Billy's early managers, as most artist managers tend to be, is they tend to be the therapist, talking the artist through problems and helping them out, sort things out to help the artist continue and do their thing. And well, this was the case here. And, reading this article, you can tell how aware Irwin was about what Billy had going on and the affair with Elizabeth and how much it was really kind of torturing him because he was clearly falling for her, but it was his best friend's girl, as the Cars song says. He was really struggling with this. I think he wanted to come clean, but felt it was going to destroy a lot of things. In this article, he confided in Mazur about it, and he says he called me one night after midnight and asked me to meet him at a diner. So I go, and he tells me he's been having this affair, and Elizabeth is threatening to leave everybody. Billy was not in the best of places. I think he was drinking. My wife and I were living in Far Rockaway, and we took him to live with us, sleeping on our couch. I got up one morning, and on a table are the words to a song I had never seen called Tomorrow is Today. One of the key lines is, "What's the use of always dreaming if tomorrow is today?" It was like, give me the sleeping pills and let me die. It was like a suicide note. The next thing I know, Billy is in a coma at Meadowbrook Hospital. He drank furniture polish.
I'm assuming that was actually 1970. Based on when Cold Spring Harbor comes out, it would have been too close to being 70.
Yeah, I think you're probably right because by July he was already recording the album. So I'm thinking that this was probably late 70.
But Irwin was very much responsible for getting things started with Cold Spring Harbor because it's actually Irwin that introduces him to Artie Ripp. So Irwin's the one, as we said, that made the suggestion that if you want other people to record your songs, you got to make your own album. All the people I've talked to in the music industry say if you want to get your songs heard, you should make your own recording.
But the advice I got from people in the music business was, well, if you want people to hear your songs, make an album. And then you go out on the road and you do shows and you promote your album. I thought this is a strange way to be a songwriter. But it just so coincided with the era of the singer-songwriter. And that's where my career went.
That seemed to be enough to get him started because this is when he starts demoing all the songs that became part of Cold Spring Harbor, and also obviously all those other songs that didn't make it on there.
Something just caught my eye, which is kind of amusing in this article. We were talking about, when did Billy tell John about the whole thing? It says, after Billy got out of the hospital, he said that he was quitting the music business. He didn't, but he did eventually tell John that he loved Elizabeth. John responded by breaking Billy's nose with one punch. Elizabeth eventually left John for Billy. And there's some old interviews where Billy talks about his nose specifically and attributes the way it looks to being an amateur boxer when he was younger. So was it the boxing? Or was it John Small?
Hey, man, I got to say it. There's a lot of retconning in the Billy Joel history, so I'm going to go ahead and attribute this one to John Small.
Right?
It's so funny for a year with so little to go on. There's so many things that get set in motion in 1970 that come to fruition later.
The fact that John Small and Billy remained friends through the years.
Yeah.
In what world does that happen? I mean, think about it. Your first two semi-successful bands are together. And you know how that is when you're in a relationship with your bandmates and if you're going through the trenches like that. Then Billy has an affair with his girl, falls in love with her, and she leaves him for Billy. And then, 10 years later, John's directing Billy's music videos.
Forget this year. We're not even going to get into what goes on in 1972. That's like a caper movie, man. So you'll all have to stick around for a couple more months till we get to that one. So at any rate, at some point during this, because we don't get a month by month anywhere, around the time, I guess, that Billy comes clean to John, he's also demoing up for what will become Cold Spring Harbor. And at the same time, Erwin Mazur is talking to Artie Ripp. But first he talks to Michael Lang, who was part of the group that put on Woodstock. So Erwin's trying to get Michael Lang to get behind Billy, but Michael Lang, being the whiz businessman that he is actually trying to push a guy named Velvet Turner. Right. We all know how great Velvet Turner turned out. So, clearly Michael Lang, after taking a bath on Woodstock, clearly put his next set of chips on the right pile.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Billy was getting to the point where he wanted out, so to speak, and he kind of gave Erwin a ultimatum. He basically said, I'm going to give you 30 days to get me a deal. And ultimately that led to the meeting of Artie Ripp.
So Michael Lang's not interested in Billy, but Michael Lang has an office next to Artie Ripp at Paramount Music. And so one night, he says around midnight, he just plays him a tape of Billy. Says, what do you think? He says, it's pretty good. Michael says, yeah, this guy's gotten turned down by every record company in New York City. And Artie's like, really? I think this guy's terrific. So Michael gives Artie Ripp Erwin Mazur's information as Billy's manager to get in touch. And so that's how that fateful partnership began.
First, he teamed up with this man, Artie Ripp. Artie's a Los Angeles record producer who 10 years ago heard a demo tape and signed Billy Joel sight unseen to a long-term contract.
I love Billy Joel. I want to have Billy Joel on my record label. We pick up the phone. This is Artie Ripp. Oh, the guy at the other end of the phone. I said, where is Billy now? He says, Billy's sleeping on the floor of a laundromat in Long Island right now. I says, you're kidding? He says, Billy's broke. I'm broke. Everybody's turned us down. We don't understand why nobody believes and appreciates Billy's genius. For 7 years, we've been working on him, coming from the group The Hassles, and he was a star in that group, and so on. We don't understand. I said, I'm glad nobody else understood it. I'm glad you finally wound up at the bottom with me. We'll go to the top together.
Say what you will about Artie Ripp, and trust me, there's plenty to say about the guy, but he clearly knew Billy's potential. I mean, all these other labels and suits passed on Billy without much thought, but Artie saw something and wanted a piece of it and got a lot of pieces of it.
A lot of pieces of it.
What's the line? Too many pieces means you're touching too much.
Yeah, right? Or Getting Closer. Let's see if I can do this from memory. I love that song. It's just so sidebar. I guess we can get into this on the bridge one, but Getting Closer is on that small list of songs that are written by rock stars about rock stars, and they shouldn't be relatable at all, but they just are. They just kind of seep all the way through. But all the comment and their acrobats to stomp me in the ground. If I count up their percentages, I know they're getting rich, but they haven't taken everything. Those paybacks are a bitch. Comment in their acrobats just gets me every time. Like if Bob Dylan grew up in New York, not moved there, but grew up in New York, he'd write a line like that. Obviously, Billy signs this god-awful deal with Artie, which was going to lock him in for, 20 years? Something crazy like that?
It was a long time with not much money.
Right.
And it was such a bad deal that Billy really unwittingly signed away so much. And you would think your manager is going to be looking out, try to get you the better deal and, to make sure you're not signing away everything.
Yeah, it does say in one book, it does make mention, though, that because Billy was like on the point of giving up because that 30-day clock was ticking, Erwin was really pushing as hard as possible to get that deal to go through quickly. And I guess that played a role in it. Like it says here, he was even getting ready to ham it up. He was going to be like, I need $15,000 now because Billy's considering killing himself, which I guess was like the lie based in truth in that I think that had already happened by that point, you know. I guess that plays a part in signing a shitty deal. Like, I just got to get this guy a deal somehow.
And after being passed by everyone, maybe he wasn't willing to negotiate much.
Irwin wasn't a complete whiz kid in the music industry either. I mean, he was doing his part, but he wasn't that seasoned, really.
And Billy has a history of that. You know, the managers he's had in his life really weren't these mega managers when he started working with them. Irwin here, obviously Elizabeth, who managed him from 76 to 1981 or so. Frank Weber took over to disastrous results, but he took over and was with him up through 87 and 88.
And then it was just Billy on his own after that.
Right.
We don't need to get too far into Cold Spring Harbor or the demos. Anybody that hasn't gone back to one of our first shows from the beginning of 2020, go ahead and check out Cold Spring Harbor. We go into great detail about that handful of songs and sort of what they meant.
In July of 71 is when the production of the record finally begins. So I'm guessing the wheeling and dealing that went on securing this record deal happened in the early half of 1971, because by July, Billy had entered the studio with Artie and Artie's cast of musicians to begin recording Cold Spring Harbor. Cold Spring Harbor begins the stretch of albums where Billy is working with session musicians, and regardless of talent, and many of these players were fantastic players, Billy just wasn't happy with the result.
And of course, he certainly wasn't happy with this end result because of the infamous tape being sped up in the mastering process, and he sounds like a chipmunk on the original recording. And he has a party, and he hadn't listened to it yet, and he puts the record on for everyone, and everybody busts his hump, and he throws the record out the window or down the street.
I can feel it because I've been there where I've put out a record, and I remember being so excited to play my band's record for friends and being so proud of it. I couldn't imagine something like that happening to mine, where just something happened. But, at the end of the day, I did mine as an independent artist. My band was independent, and I co-produced the album. So I oversaw every step of the production, down to the artwork, the CD duplication. I provided the master for the CD. So it was all on me if something got screwed up. But I couldn't imagine getting it back and just being devastated with what I heard.
Nevertheless, album comes out November 1st. It goes on to do just about nothing, except perhaps in northeastern Pennsylvania, because when Billy goes to play there in a couple years, and as we know from the recently unearthed Northampton, PA bootleg, he goes there trying to play Piano Man stuff, and everybody there wants to hear Cold Spring Harbor. But the band doesn't know Cold Spring Harbor because he's touring behind Piano Man and had just put the road band together for the most part. Anyway, that's an aside for yet another year.
What I can only imagine is, somehow the college radio station got a copy of it and latched onto it. I was thinking about the release of it too. That just tells you how terrible this company was. Can you imagine it coming out being roughly 8% too fast? I think somebody calculated, pitch corrected it and figured out what the percentage it was off on. Not only do they realize that it's screwed up and it's a problem, but they do nothing about it. They don't repress it. They do nothing. They leave it all out there, and that's the end of it. Wipes his hands of it.
Okay, can we then try to reconcile these two things? We know Artie Rip's a scammer. There's a lot of shady stuff that goes on all through his career and this and that. With these things in mind, it's not so surprising that he's going to rip off a young desperate guy like Billy Joel circa 1970. Is it either retconning, BS, or something slightly different where he says, oh really, I think this guy's terrific. So Artie believes in him, but not enough to fix the record. Not enough to put any promotional oomph behind it.
That's what's puzzling about the whole thing, because clearly his objective was to make as much money on this guy as he could. Even if it's not shady, a business is a business and you want to maximize profit.
Right.
Well, when the product is so badly screwed up, wouldn't it be in your best interest to remedy the situation? Be like, all right, let's recall what was pressed. We'll get it remastered, a fresh pressing, get it out there again so it's right, and then go from there. Didn't happen.
Nothing. So that's weird.
Very strange.
So in 1972, he'll go on a multi-city tour. But 1971 is where we start seeing our first traces of solo Billy Joel shows.
There's a handful of shows that we found, namely two specifically that were right around the time of the Cold Spring Harbor release. So there were a few things that have surfaced in the past 10 years or so. The first one we found was November 9th, 1971, which is a mini concert that was aired on WLIR, Long Island. And this was the one that was recorded at Ultrasonic Studios. And this was just 8 days after after the album was released. So this would have been November 9th.
And if Ultrasonic sounds familiar, that's where he ultimately recorded Turnstiles just a few years later. Ultrasonic was also famous for hosting concerts there that were broadcast on the radio.
And so what we found here was a 5-song set. We had Everybody Loves You Now, She's Got Away, Got to Begin Again, All American Blues, and Captain Jack.
Now, these are probably all very familiar except for All American Blues. Now, there's a throwaway line at the end of All American Blues. He says after he plays it that, as I was saying, or as we were saying before, although there's not much going on in 1971, so many of the things that did happen seemed to be things that got set into motion this year that came to fruition later. In All American Blues, he starts off doing a sort of John Wayne voice, then he does like a generic country hick voice, and he goes through a couple things that way. And at the end of the song, he hears the applause and he goes, "Oh, the crowd likes impressions, let me write that down."
Oh, you like that, huh? You like that, huh? That's a good time killer. We'll throw that in the act somewhere. Okay, write that down. You know, crowd likes impressions. Put it in the thing. Throw out material, do impressions all night. Okay.
Now, is this somehow the first time he does an impression on stage in a situation where people are apt to listen to him? If you figure the Hassles were a go-go/psychedelic band, nobody's quiet enough. There was usually nobody in the room for Attila, from what we know.
And they're doing like keyboard-driven, like Deep Purple kind of thing. So he's not up on stage like working the crowd doing impressions.
Being that this is the first show he plays after this record comes out, there's a very good chance that this is sort of the first time he does an impression, albeit on the mic or on any sort of official recording, and takes note that the crowd really likes it and decides he's going to keep doing it.
And continued to do it ever since, really. That's kind of also been a part of his musical palette as well. You know, you always hear him talk about how much he hated his voice, and he was like, oh, I'm trying to do Steve Winwood here. I'm trying to do Ray Charles. I'm trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. Billy was always trying to sound like somebody else. That kind of carried over into banter part of the shows.
Banter, and as you said, carried into the songwriting when he was always trying to be someone else. I have no place to say this, but maybe this is the first time he was conscious of that fact. He was clearly trying to be Blue-Eyed Soul and the Hassles, and then Psychedelia with Hour of the Wolf, and then Deep Purple / Jimi Hendrix proto-heavy metal in Attila. And I guess none of those things were really him, and he probably didn't, as we know, he didn't even really think he was a singer-songwriter. He was certainly aware that this was the way to go in 1970, 1971, but he wasn't fully signed on to it.
Right.
So he's been doing impressions for years, and it seems like this show, November 9th, 1971, as far as the public's concerned, is his first like sort of statement of intent there. That he's acknowledging and he's embracing the fact that he does impressions, and he'll go on to make that the sort of the cornerstone of his career.
And this is really him discovering who he is now as a piano player, as a frontman, as Billy Joel. And one thing that I love about this 5-song set is here we are late 71 and he's already got Captain Jack in the bag.
That's right. Yeah, fully formed, ready to go.
Yep.
Didn't make it on to Cold Spring Harbor.
This song is about, I suppose most of you live on the island, and maybe you might recognize some people, or maybe you might recognize yourself, because that's what it's about. It's about, you know, Long Island. If you can get into the meaning of it. It's called Captain Jack. Saturday night and you're still hanging around. You're tired of living in your one-horse town. You'd like to find a little hole in the ground for a while.
Was this written? Was this done before Cold Spring Harbor was recorded?
Yeah, it's not on the demos.
Right.
Where did this song come from?
Right, that's what I'm saying. No demos from 71 of this has seemed to surface, but here he is 8 days after the record comes out. He's already got this epic in Captain Jack done, fully realized.
Yeah.
So he was already advancing his songwriting craft before this record even came out.
It really makes you wonder about this song because, okay, one more time. Captain Jack, the next year is going to be pivotal to his career. Pivotal. When he plays it at Sigma Sounds in Philadelphia, WMMR, that's going to kickstart Piano Man. And here it is, November 9th, 1971, and he's debuting it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, out of nowhere. It sounds nothing like anything else on Cold Spring Harbor, but Cold Spring Harbor did not sound unified anyway. You can't even tell if he left it off because it didn't sound right, or it wasn't written in time, or whatever was going on there. But yeah, this song just comes out of nowhere. I think Everybody Loves You Now doesn't end up meaning anything until Songs in the Attic, I think. It was a non-starter until then. And what was the second song again?
She's Got Away.
Same thing with She's Got Away. She's Got Away doesn't come up again until Songs in the Attic. That's when it becomes a single. Got to Begin Again just disappears with Cold Spring Harbor. All American Blues clearly was just a novelty song that didn't see the light of day otherwise. And there it is, number 5, Captain Jack, ready to go in November of 71.
Compared to the material on Cold Spring Harbor, it's a very complex song and it's a long song. You almost wonder because, with the intent originally of Cold Spring Harbor being, I'm going to record these songs to shop to other artists. Maybe this one was in the bag written, but he wanted to hold it back for himself, just in case.
I like that fan theory. I like it. Your ideas are appealing to me, and I would like to subscribe to your newsletter.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.
But I appreciate a lot that you keyed into Captain Jack so we could really shed light on that, because you know what? What I really took away from this one, the applause at the beginning and end of Everybody Loves You Now. Again, remember where he was in this, because this, for all intents and purposes, is Billy's debut as a singer-songwriter. Before this, he was in bands. If he had done anything else, it was session work, or he was plunking away in a lounge or something, doing covers. I don't know if we've mentioned this, but of all things to figure was good ancillary reading to this era would be the Twisted Sister documentary on Netflix, because it shows you the club scene on Long Island in the 70s. Granted, that was a couple years later, but that club scene was bopping, obviously, before Twisted Sister. This audience at Ultrasonic Studios knew who Billy was, and going back to that idea of, maybe that shiftless kid or whatever, maybe he wasn't shiftless, but, just looked a little hapless, didn't have his stuff together, a little messy, whatever. Think about what it was like when, you're kind of following this guy because you've been going to the clubs for a couple of years. First he was in the Hassles, and then the Hassles were just doing some, bopping stuff, and then they start getting a little psychedelic. And then you're like, what the hell is this guy thinking with this Attila? If you happen to go in and check that out. And you're following this guy and he's getting this rapturous, warm applause. Clearly this isn't the Madison Square Garden applause or wherever that you get for Everybody Loves You Now and She's Got Away on Songs in the Attic. But you can really feel how warm it is. If you've listened to this bootleg before, go back again and take stock of what that applause sounds like. And if you have to, go then to Sigma Sounds in 72, where it's warm, but it's not the same. It's obviously a very small crowd at Sigma. But they don't have that same visceral connection. It's not his hometown. It's not where he's been playing for years in various bands. You get the feeling that, for as depressed as he was at this time, for as downtrodden as he was, the crowd really lifts him up, I think.
I think that's probably what it was. These fans who were fans of Attila and the Hassles, who knew Billy from these bands, were just staying along for the ride. And I know Attila did not do well, obviously, but the Hassles had quite a fan base on Long Island. And so they were packing clubs, playing some big shows. I mean, it certainly stands to reason that there was that carryover that were at least wanted to see what Billy was all about as a solo artist.
So then he plays November 17th at the Gaslight A-Go-Go in New York City. He does November 23rd through 25th at my father's place in Roslyn. And then he's back December 1st at the Gaslight A-Go-Go in New York City. And that's it for 1971. That's pretty much the end of the year. Next year he goes on a small tour. None of it comes to fruition. He and Elizabeth head out to California under some very soap opera / Raising Arizona caper story type circumstances.
72 is a wild year, and that'll be a fun one to get into down the road. I think there was a while where I almost lumped Cold Spring Harbor in with the LA years. Maybe just because the timeline always used to be so blurry, but it really wasn't until, 72 and he finally got hip to how bad his deal was with Artie Rip that he's like, I got to get out of here. If I am ever going to succeed, I need to get out of this thing.
But that's a ways to come. For now, that's 1971.
That's right. So if by some crazy luck, any of you out there saw any of these few shows in 71 or bought Cold Spring Harbor within the first year or so it came out. Did any of you go back that far? If you did, that's amazing, and we want to hear from you.
Please email us.
Yeah, definitely. You can reach us, glasshousespodcast@gmail.com, as always. Keep those emails coming. They're so fun to read and respond to, and you guys offer some great insight that we don't always think about. So, yeah, it's such a treat to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, it widens our perspective as well. And if you don't want to do it over email for whatever reason, we're on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just look us up as Glass Houses, Billy Joel Podcast. Unfortunately, no, we are not on TikTok yet, but I have Olivia working on it, I swear.
And you can also find us on our website, glasshouses.pod.com. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, if you guys could leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review, that would really go a long way. Just takes 2 seconds and would really help us get in front of more people. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you soon. Thanks.
Yes, I got to begin again, and it's hard. Yes, it's hard.